All right, so let's take that idea then,
Mm-hmm.
and let's go deeper with it. And I'll use the example of Rob Zombie's remake of Halloween, where you had a character that originally Michael Myers is just the Shape is
Mm-hmm.
what the original Halloween, and they just call him the Shape in the credits, and he is not in that first movie. He's nobody's brother. He's not like he's there's no backstory really other than he killed his sister when he was a kid, went to an insane asylum, and now he's free. And like his psychiatrist says, look, he's just evil.
Mm-hmm.
He's literally just a monster. He is literally the boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he's so scary. Well, Rob Zombie, who you would think is, with his obsession with evil and violence and grotesquerie, you would think that he, of all people, would lean into that evil. Instead, he gives us an hour or more of Michael being a kid, getting treated like crap, growing up in a crappy family, being abused by everybody that makes him into this monster. Why do we have a society that cannot bear the thought of an evil villain just being evil? Like, why do we have to, in all these movies and all these games, comics, everything else, why do we have to take a villain that's evil and make them somehow sympathetic? Why do we have to empathize with the villain anymore instead of just letting the villain be evil?
I think, and this is going to sound pretentious, and I don't care, but for all our learned people out there, for all the morons like us that paid a lot of money to go study nothing, um, I think it has to do with like the kind of Rousseauian idea of like the blank slate or the noble savage,
Mm-hmm.
which at least led to the blank slate idea. I think we believe this pseudoscientific idea that people are made into something. Now, there are conditions, of course, that can influence. There's no getting around that. But long before that, the way that that was explained was that evil exists, and the best way we can explain it is possession. Whether that was in the Christian worldview or any worldview, it was that there are spirits that possess people, and you can't explain.
Or
Yeah,
or at the very least, the idea that there's an evil in human nature and
mm-hmm.
temptation can, even if it's not possession,
Yeah.
temptation,
Well, yeah,
and
that's what I was going to go with possession
yeah,
or
yeah,
influence.
right,
Yeah.
right. It's that idea that if there's opportunity and there's power, then evil will occur.
Yeah, and humans are avatars for it. Now that's two different
Right.
levels, but I mean, but you can still reduce that down to a human, get rid of the spiritual side and be like, humans had the potential for evil from birth, and if anyone's ever had kids, they would know that. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. I mean, there's stories about, historically it's rare, but there are children who murder.
mm-hmm,
And you look, well, how does a 9-year old decide to take scissors and kill the little boy across the street that's 5? Well, that child, somehow or another, that child has already been,
mm-hmm,
you know, decided, I'm gonna do an evil thing.
yeah,
And
and
the kid was raised well, had a loving family, had a nurturing
mm-hmm,
background, just a rotten kid.
mm-hmm. And there's no understanding of compulsion with that either. Like,
Yeah,
there are kids that did
yeah.
stuff like that and then broke down and wept, and there's ones that did
Hmm.
it and were, they're
I
clearly
thought it was
psychopath.
hilarious.
Yeah, they're clearly psychopath. But people understand this. I mean, I have very little study of it, but psychopaths, the way that it's kind of portrayed, we always see like the high functioning kind of guys. I don't quote
Hmm.
me on this, but there's a lot. There was a correlation, or there were theories, I should say, of correlation, and whatever this means, we'll go into that later. We can of
Hmm.
low IQ and psychopathy, and that was at least a theory because they had people like they went through a ton of prisons. It doesn't matter the
Hmm.
race or sex of the prisoner. One of the common
Hmm.
things they found was that there are people who can't think abstractly. They can't think
Hmm.
what someone else, but they can't even think what they would do in a different situation. Like if you said, "Have you had breakfast today?" If you hadn't eaten breakfast today, how would you feel? And the response is, "Well, I did eat breakfast today." They
Yeah,
can't
they couldn't possibly. Empathy isn't there.
even for
Yeah,
themselves. Even they can't even.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, well, how does Johnny feel if you stab him? I don't know. I wasn't stabbed. And then they couldn't answer, well, how would you feel if you were stabbed? Was like, well, I've been stabbed before. They can't imagine. They can't.
Yeah.
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 And it turns out that Link is kind of, I hate to use this term, it sounds bad, but like kind of like reptilian. That's just how some people, like some human beings, kind of function that way.
Well, they call it, they call it your lizard brain.
Yeah.
Like that's actually not that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, it is. It's a cold, calculated, and almost runs on autopilot kind of thing.
Well,
That's in the back
and
of
we're
your
trying,
mind.
we're also trying to define empathy from like an actual academic sense, because they're like, well, it used to be that we thought that serial killers didn't have empathy, psychopaths didn't have empathy. It's like, well, then how can they think where their prey is going to be? How can they predict? How can they basically track and understand they're going to be here, they're going to do this, they're going to be this way? Why? Like, how do I know they're going to feel fear when I show a knife to them? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that there is. I think that sometimes they can understand something that they don't feel themselves.
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to define empathy. It's like, well, if empathy is being able to imagine or understand how someone else feels, then it makes sense that serial killers can understand at some level how someone else would feel, because they can predict motions and actions. Anyway, all that to say, I'm not an IQ person. I don't think IQ equals someone's actual intelligence, or of course not their worth. I have to say that because we're on the internet. So if you mention IQ on YouTube, you have to do all that.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, all that to say, yeah, evil exists. And if anyone is, particularly in the West, had just stepped to another country that's not as rich as yours, it's way more prevalent. And if you don't believe me, just go walk down like a major city street at night, 3 a.m. Like you're probably gonna get stabbed or shot or beaten to death, and it might be by someone who's crazy or someone who's just evil. And good luck picking the two out, you know.
Right.
But it doesn't matter when you're getting stabbed to death. All that to say, I don't know.
It's killing me. Fill out this questionnaire.
I don't know. Long answer short, I think it's that blank slate idea that people think that humans are just made into something, when it's like, no, there's clearly something there from birth. And I think people who haven't had children or haven't worked with children don't understand that.